yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
In describing his experience of World War II's Pacific Theatre, US Marine Robert Leckie wrote, "It was a darkness without time. It was an impenetrable darkness. To the right and left of me rose those terrible formless things from my imagination, which I could not see because there was no light. I could not see, but I dared not close my eyes, lest the darkness crawl beneath my eyelids and suffocate me." Any misconceived notions that the soldiers of the Empire of Japan were in any way an ill-fitting underclass of peoples, not prepared for the modern technological might of the West, were soon provided a sobering reality check. As old empires crumbled, the brutal, unforgiving tenacity of Japan's way of war was clear. There would be no easy victories given to those in the Pacific Theatre. Every square inch of jungle, every grain of sand would be paid for in blood. Following Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, their military quickly took advantage of the success. Much to the dismay of the Allies, Japan continued to expand their holdings throughout the Pacific and westward toward India. This was until their decisive loss at the Battle of Midway in 1942. Outplayed in the strategy of battle by the US Navy, Japan lost an irreplaceable 4 aircraft carriers, and in doing so, lost the ability to dictate the theatre of war. Japan prepared to go on the defensive. The next few years in the Pacific would pit Allied forces against well-defended Japanese islands that would otherwise be insignificant specks of land in the world's largest ocean. With overwhelming naval superiority, the US forces hopped from island to island towards Japan. By October 1944, the massive new B-29 Superfortress bombers had a range capable of reaching mainland Japan. But the journey was fraught with danger. The aircraft would all too easily be intercepted by Japanese fighters, and many B-29s would be in such bad shape after their raids that they would break down over the ocean before making it home. Despite the direction the war was taking, the Pacific campaign raged on. Japanese resistance was stiffening rather than softening as its defensive chain of islands became pierced. Pushing onward, the US set its sights on the tiny volcanic island of Iwo Jima. At just 660 kilometers away from Tokyo, Iwo Jima offered a crucial staging post for any future invasion of the mainland. The honour of protecting the island fell to General Kuribayashi Tadamichi, and rather than take the US head-on, where they were sure to be outgunned, Kuribayashi elected for a defence in depth. This called for fighting from underground concealment, digging as deep as possible and keeping as low profile as possible. A complex series of pillboxes, bunkers and tunnels and cave systems riddled the island. The defenders were tasked to fight from cover, to hold out as long as possible and not to surrender. 21,000 Japanese soldiers were dug into the volcanic rock like a tick, ready to make the US Marines pay for every inch of the black sand with their blood. On the 16th of February 1945, with the island encircled by naval assets, the pre-landing bombardment began. Six battleships and 5 cruisers relentlessly let loose on the island with a constant barrage of shell fire. As early as June 1944, the island was being heavily attacked from the sea and air. A total of 7,000 to 14,000 tons of explosives was dropped to provide support to the invasion. the 8-square-mile island would suffer the longest and most intensive shelling of any Pacific island during the war. More than 450 ships massed off of Iwo, with the first wave of Marines arriving to the beach as salvos fired overhead. 1 minute early, at 8:59 am. The hope for a straightforward landing were dashed when Marines were faced with a 15-foot high slope of soft black volcanic sand, allowing for neither a secure footing nor the construction of foxholes to protect them from hostile fire. Volcanic sand also bogged down the supporting vehicles. An ever-increasing number of Marines collected on the beach, and yet the level of retaliation was minimal. This was no mistake on the Japanese part. They were placed exactly where Kuribayashi wanted them. After allowing the Americans to pile up men and machinery on the beach for just over an hour, Kuribayashi unleashed fire and brimstone. Japanese artillery positions blasted the shoreline, whilst concealed Japanese machine gun nests shot down anyone exposing themselves for too long.
We went into the beach, dropped the tailgate, and we got up and went around them. And the first thing I did when I got around them, of course, was hit the deck so I wouldn't get shot at because they were shooting at us. And I looked up and a head rolled across in front of me. And it was one of my buddies. And that was my introduction to Iwo Jima.
Despite this chaos of the first day against well-coordinated Japanese resistance, the Marines succeeded in isolating Mount Suribachi from the rest of the island as night fell. 30,000 men had landed on the shore, but this was at a heavy cost, with some units cut down to a fraction of their previous size. Out of the 900 men of the 25th Marines 3rd Battalion who had landed in the morning on the right flank, only 150 Marines were left in fighting condition at the end of the day, an 83% casualty rate. The most famous moment of the battle, and one of the most defining images of the war, was the raising of the flag on top of Mount Suribachi. It took 3 days after landing to reach this summit, and Marines twice raised the flag, with the first flag considered too small to be effectively seen. The second flag raising was photographed by Pulitzer Prize winner Joe Rosenthal of the Associated Press. 6 Marines from E Company's 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines, were involved in the photo, but such was the ferocious reality of Iwo that 3 of the 6, Sergeant Michael Strank, Corporal Harlan Block, and Private First Class Franklin Sousley, were killed in action just days after. Whilst the high ground of the island had been successfully taken, the most dogged defence was in the central and northern sectors of the island, where the crucial 2 airfields were located. Kuribayashi concentrated his energy here, with miles of interlocking caves, concrete blockhouses and pillboxes yet to be discovered, as the 23rd, 25th and 27th Regiments began to measure their advances in yards. Marines expected the usual Japanese banzai charges in the night. This had been the standard Japanese final defence strategy in previous battles against enemy ground forces in the Pacific. Kuribayashi had strictly forbidden these human wave attacks because he considered them to be futile. Japanese defenders would force the Americans to take on their well-entrenched defensive positions instead. Determined fighting had put the airfield nearest the landings under Marine control by the end of the second day, but it was in the push to the second airfield that it would prove the most treacherous. The Japanese had sighted their guns down the runways and the flat expanse of this second airfield, with artillery zeroed in and ready for the inevitable assault. This was overlaid with a continuation of a well-fortified multitude of machine gun nests and riflemen hidden in strategic positions designed to take advantage of the increasingly rough terrain and to protect the 2 northernmost airfields. With this deep belt of fortifications running from coast to coast, the only solution was by way of brute force, through the terrain and its defenders. After 6 full days of battle, 1,605 Marines were dead, 5,496 were wounded. and Kuribayashi still controlled 2/3 of Iwo Jima. Each division fought hard to gain ground against the determined defender, with engagements often ending in the death of the last Japanese soldier. Many Japanese positions proved impervious to close air support bombing and strafing and had to be taken by direct ground assault or by sealing off the entrances. The Marines learned that the most effective way to nullify strongpoints was through the use of explosives and flamethrowers to flush out Japanese troops in the tunnels or bury them underground. The complexity of these underground mini-fortresses was such that even a position that had been seemingly knocked out may only have been for a short time before its occupants returned from the underground passageway or relocated to an entirely different position to start the process all over again. Despite the initial issues with making use of them, tanks were ideal for taking out pillboxes. However, the effectiveness meant that they drew the attention of the defenders as a priority to be taken out. Mortars and rockets would inevitably cascade down on them, create a ring of havoc for anyone caught nearby. Their advance would often be minimal and in single file, moving carefully through minefields, partially cleared by engineers and bulldozers under the cover of artillery fire. This tug of war continued for some time until finally, on the 9th of March, after 18 days of some of the most hellish combat experienced in the war, a far cry from the 2-day prediction, the waters of Iwo Jima's northern shoreline had been reached. Despite this, Japanese resistance was still heavy and desperate in all sectors of the front line, with certain defeat only a matter of time. Banzai charges and suicide by explosive were a tragic and ultimately futile gesture to an otherwise inevitable lost cause. On the 16th of March, the island was officially declared secure, although small pockets of organised Japanese continued to resist for several weeks, with the official end of the battle, the 26th of March, 1945. Through this 36-day ordeal, 6,871 US lives were lost, with 19,217 wounded. A total of 27 Medals of Honor, the highest and most prestigious military decoration available, were awarded to 22 Marines and 5 sailors, 14 of them posthumously. This is the most awarded in any single battle ever. Of the roughly 21,000 Japanese defenders, only 216 survived the battle to be taken prisoner, and an estimated 3,000 went into hiding during the US occupation of the island.